P.
Welcome to the Draft Professor Podcast Network. This is the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I would like to remind you of who is bringing you daily draft content. Randall Slifer, Josh Townsend, Jake Robertson, Bill Sparks, Parker Blake, Brock Vieira, Newt Weston, Devin Jackson, David Neese, Jacob Roach, Owen, Jared Zhang, Dean Bruce, Brian Maffey. Without these individuals, we could not bring you daily draft content covering the top 175 players in the NFL draft. Thank you for watching, and we'll be with you in a few seconds. Well, welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. My name's Jim. I'm joined today by Dean, and I promised we're going to get that confused a few times in the next hour or so. But before we get started, Dean Bruce, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. This is a welcome break from finals for me. I am very happy to not be thinking about all the exams I have coming up.
Fantastic. Dean Kindig, welcome back. It is great to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's fun. I feel like I know Dean Bruce because I thought that I had actually been on a podcast with him. It turned out that I'd actually just watched one of these Mrs. R Relevant podcasts, and he mentioned being at Temple. So I'm glad to be with you guys.
Fantastic. So we're going to go over some edges and offensive tackles today. I think we have about 9 players. We're going to go over the scouting reports. If anybody listening has questions, drop them into the chat. But without too much of an introduction, Dean Kindig, would you like to tell us about R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma?
Yes. So my bent on all of this, I'll apologize in advance, might be that I'm looking at this from Brandon Beane's point of view, the general manager of the Buffalo Bills. One of the things that I noticed right away is that Bills jets have been going back and forth to Oklahoma a couple of times, and he's tied for. I actually have 4 jet visits to Oklahoma from the Bills jet. He excels in a multiple defensive scheme, which is a wonderful choice for Brandon Beane because he's going to be one of those players that fits in sooner than later. He's 20th nationally and 5th in the SEC with 8 sacks. Those were all secured in the last 9 games. So he's almost that sack a week kind of guy. You'd want to watch the Tulane game, 3 sacks, the Auburn game, 2 sacks, and Alabama where he had 1 sack. I just like his clutch play. I like that he helps Oklahoma protect leads, except the ones that one of the ones that he was in that was scouted by the Bills, but he's done really, really well, and it's been a two-year interest by the Bills about him. So the best stat I can give you is that 6 of his 8 sacks were in the 4th quarter. So that helps protect leads. If you're a team that seems to be losing games late, you might want to consider R. Mason Thomas. Should I say where I have him ranked?
Definitely, please.
Okay. Right now I have him at 201. He's probably an ascendant player. The biggest strike is his height. He's 6'2", and for an edge that's almost a deal breaker with Brandon Beane. Think about those. I think he was out for 4 games maybe in 2023. Yep. He's still got a mess of pressures on the quarterback. So I think he's going to be a key asset. he is a junior, so we're going to have to watch that.
Yep. So Dean Bruce,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I was really happy to hear you talk about his clutch playability because I remember from that Tulane game, he finished that game with a strip sack fumble that, just iced it for Oklahoma, allowed them to start off the year pretty strong. I think they started off 3-0, tapered off to end the year. I was really happy to hear about the clutch play because I totally agree. I think that's a guy you're going to look at who can come in and just sort of, finish out games. I think, and that extends to his game too. I think he was a very strong finisher, and you can tell by the 9 sack numbers. I think very consistently you can count on him to finish the rep. I think he brings a decent set of pass rush moves. I wasn't like wowed by anything technical particularly, but I thought it was a good enough bag to where if you get him with a strong defensive coordinator, you're not going to have any trouble like from the technical perspective, like with him losing reps based on guys who are, veteran offensive tackles in the league. I thought he held his own in that regard. I'm a little worried, as you said, about height, length, and weight, because I think if you're playing an edge rusher at 243, you're almost looking at them to function sort of as an outside linebacker in an outside linebacker role, sort of an exclusive pass rusher. And you can sort of tell because I think Thomas at times can struggle with run defense, especially when he's asked to crash the middle. But I think he does a particularly good job of setting the edge at times, especially against some of his especially in that Tulane game. That Tulane game was a masterclass for the most part. That 3 sack performance, I was very happy with it. And I also thought he ended the year really well. I mean, he went up against 3 of the toughest offensive lines of the SEC in those last 3 games that he played, which were LSU, Bama, and Missouri. And he recorded a sack in every one of them, and I thought he was pretty consistently garnering pressures in that Alabama game. And you can say the Alabama tackles aren't what they used to be, but I was still very happy with his performance despite the level of competition he was up against. I mean, he got a sack off on Will Campbell. He got a sack off on Armand Membu, who's a guy who, people are talking about as a potential riser either this year or next year. I was very happy with his play overall. I think that he's probably he's a junior, so whether or not he declares still up in the air, we're starting to see declarations roll out right about like now. I've seen a few from the juniors who aren't playing in the college football playoffs, so I think we'll hear more about Thomas's journey soon. But I think if you're looking for a guy and you don't mind weight and some length concerns, maybe more like a Rams type defensive lineman where they're less concerned about weight and stuff, I think, and they have much less strict measurement concerns. I think he might be a good fit, even though I think they've got their defensive line pretty much lined up. But that kind of philosophy is where I think R. Mason Thomas fits in. I had him sort of like in that late 4th to early 5th range, solid top 150 player for me, I think, so far. We'll see as the class depth continues out, but I thought he'd be a strong addition to an edge class.
So I want to give a shout out to a couple things. So first of all, Dean Bruce, I love the fact that you called out some of the offensive tackles in the draft that he played against. Because to me, that's a great measurement stick when you're going up against NFL talent.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
What do you guys think of his athleticism to play special teams?
One of the things that I was thinking about was the Bills last year selected Javon Thomas in the 5th round. He's almost the same exact size. I think the difference is that here, did I say Javon Thomas? I meant Javon Solomon.
Javon Solomon.
Yeah.
I was going to let it slide for a minute.
No. Believe me, it's important to let me know. Javon Solomon is 2 inches shorter and was picked at about the same spot. So you're probably right about looking at that 5th round, and even the late 4th round. The Bills have 3 of those. So we're gonna be looking at that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he probably compares athletically pretty similarly, especially with straight line speed to Javon Solomon. I mean, Solomon ran a 4.72 at the combine last year. That feels about the range I expect R. Mason Thomas to run. I was happy with his explosiveness. I wasn't thinking of him as like, I don't know, some of the other edge rushers we've talked about who have these like 243-pound weights. I'm thinking of David Bailey we talked about a few weeks ago, who I was not very in on, but his big trait was his strong speed. I think Thomas comes in a kick slower than David Bailey does, but I think in that Javon Solomon range, he probably runs around the low 4.7s and definitely could make an impact on special teams. I mean, he he's pretty good straight line, and I felt like his pursuit ability towards getting towards the quarterback was pretty strong. So I think he could get some reps in on special teams and make an impact there.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Dean Kindig made the next point I was going to make, and that's if you are a situational pass rusher, you can have a 10-year career playing 30% of the snaps per game. It is so difficult to find edge rushers that if you can do it, you're going to get drafted, even if the only time you play is third down in the fourth quarter.
Right.
That's a legitimate career that will pay you $5 or $10 million a year. A great examples of that would be like guys like Leonard Floyd. And then who was it? Trent Cole would be another one. Good situational pass rusher.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, so let's jump to Tyler Batty from BYU. Dean Bruce, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Batty's been on my radar for a season or two now. And he's always had sort of the balance of he's very athletic to me. I think he comes across very strong and even relatively fast for a guy who's carrying 270 pounds of weight. He's just never been all that productive outside of a pretty good season last year where he racked up 5.5 sacks. This year he took a bit of a step back, but he was also doing a little more work in the run stopping game than I was used to for him. I thought he took steps as a run stopper and was really setting the edge well in games like the Kansas game especially, and even his most recent Houston game. I thought he was doing pretty good work in. I think he's sort of been a cornerstone of that defense for a while, and while maybe this year wasn't his flashiest year, I think he's still been someone who packs bulk for the BYU defense. He's able to sort of crash the inside and plug holes really well, but he's also still got juice as a pass rusher. I mean, he didn't show it as much this year, but he was more of a pressures guy than a sack guy. I think he could work on some finishing. I think he could work on some tackling, but grades on him at the beginning of the year were pretty strong, especially because I think he's carrying pretty good arm length, somewhere in the 33 inches range. As far as build, Tyler Batty's the type of guy you're looking for. And athleticism, I think he explodes out of his stance well. I think he uses his length really well. I think he makes use of a good swim move that I like to see pretty consistently throughout his game. I would like him to see a little bit more development of his speed to power and not just sort of focusing on one or the other in a given rep. I felt like at times he would get really stuck in the outrunning the tackle to the spot or completely outpowering, and it didn't feel like at times those skills were working in tandem. But I think ultimately, as far as developmental edge rushers go, if you're looking for a guy you can build off of in terms of stature and weight, Tyler Batty's nothing to slouch at. I'm not someone who's he reminds me sort of I've used this comparison before, but Otomewo from Minnesota a couple of years ago, who was a guy who started out with some flashy sack numbers, but regressed to the mean a little later in his career and has sort of been a rotational edge rusher for the Rams. And I think Batty sort of struck me as the same type of prospect where I was like, okay, if he can work on some building a better bag and a little more speed to power, this could be someone who's a game wrecker, but he comes in as a guy who could get some rotational reps, especially in the situational pass rush game.
Where do you have him on your board right now?
In relation to the other edges or in terms of a round grade?
Round grade.
5th to 6th range. I think he's probably fringe top 150 for me.
And so that means that you would have him under R. Mason Thomas.
Under R. Mason Thomas, I think R. Mason Thomas is just a little more proven against NFL talent and a little more polished as a pass rusher. Even if Batty has probably a more NFL ready build, I think it sort of depends on what you're looking for from your developmental prospects. If you're looking for a guy to step in really quickly with floor versus a guy you're looking to build into a ceiling.
Dean Kindig, what do you think of Tyler Batty?
Well, a couple of things. One is that BYU was 9-2 this year, was 4th in pass blocking, blocking down passes. They were also. I have nobody in the top 100 this BYU. So if a scout goes to their school, I have Batty as the top person on that board. They play a multiple scheme as well. Very good interview, and of all of these guys, he has the most second most career solo tackles in his whole career. That's pretty important because his career starts is 31. He has 31 career starts and is averaging over a pressure per game. That's an important stat to Brandon Beane. He's going to be looking at Batty and Burke almost with those picks, right around the fifth round. He's going to be looking at. He's got two of them. He's probably going to be looking at both of those guys. Batty's the redshirt senior, and we'll be talking about Burke a little later. But there might be some reasons that you take this ball of clay and go with it, because he's got the size and he's got the speed going in. So he'd be one of those guys to look at very carefully. No matter what team, you're going to be looking for one where your edge rushers make tackles, and that's an important scheme difference.
Yep. So a couple questions, Dean Kindig. So BYU has a linebacker. I don't remember the linebacker's name. You have Batty above. He's higher on your board. There's another. Is Lander? No, Lander Bar.
Yeah, you're
That's Utah.
Yeah, I got BYU.
You might be
Utah.
talking about
That was my bad.
Jack
That was my
Kelly.
bad.
Jack Kelly's the BYU linebacker. I remember Ben Bywater too, but I think
Yeah, that Bill Sparks just dropped it into the chat. Thanks. Thanks,
nice.
Bill.
We like participation.
Yeah. Okay. And then the opposite of what I said for R. Mason Thomas, there's also a market for somebody that can just set the edge against the running game. Right. And like Bills fans will remember Shaq Lawson.
And Jerry Hughes.
Yeah. So like while I'm not a fan of using a first round pick on that player, the role on the defense is important. That if you know with that edge that you cannot run outside of them and they can make tackles, like Dean Kindig said, you're going to get to the passing downs where you can substitute R. Mason Thomas back in.
Well put. Well put. I always said that Jerry Hughes left the back door open a lot. So.
Yeah. So appreciate that. So I'm in the I think this is the Discord that I'm in. I'm in a Dolphins Discord. I don't know if it's this podcast or not, but I appreciate you guys dropping in. So thank you very much. So, okay. Next player, Ethan Burke from Texas. Dean Kindig, you want to kick this one off?
Yes, I do. Looking at all of these players, and you're looking for a player with length. Now, Burke up till recently was playing as the backup in a 4-2-5 scheme at Texas. Texas. I believe last I looked, Rob Boris, our tight end coach, was actually the tight ends coach for Texas. Just want to mention that. Texas is going to win on Saturday. I'll also mention that in case you want to place a bet. And the Bills, of all of these guys, went to the most Texas games and has the most connection with those schools. They went to the Georgia game, and there were still some stars on the Texas game, even though they lost. And they went to the Florida game, and then the Texas A&M game. So there's some reasons why you might want to look at that. He was backing up Sorrell at Jack DE, and he had some solid performances there, but had nine starts. I'm supposed to mention at this point that he was a lacrosse player like his dad, so it's that he had to choose between lacrosse and soccer, but you can tell that's athleticism right off the bat. You can't teach height, and he's 6'6", 260, so that helps. Those numbers should be familiar if you followed Greg Rousseau's campaign. That's what he was when he entered. So there is that. And the other thing I wanted to say is that you don't have very many FBS starts with Burke that you did with Batty. So you want to look at both of those. I have them both in that 171, 179 pick area. That would be, bottom 5, top 6. But the fit in the 4.25 is good. I like Batty's interview better than Burke's, and I like Burke's height and length better. And the Bills did go to more of those games. He is the junior, though. He doesn't have to declare. His pressures per game is higher than Batty's as well. That's why I have Burke higher than Batty.
Yeah, I feel like Burke was efficient with the reps he got, but he definitely was playing second fiddle to Bradyn Swinson in that jack role, which is kind of a shame because I mean, not totally a shame because Texas is very stacked in terms of defensive linemen. We've talked about this previously with another Texas player earlier in the podcast series, where Texas has just got this backlog of great defensive linemen, and Burke is one of those guys who's just been caught in the shuffle. But when he's on the field, it makes sense he's racking up a pressure per game because he is making plays. When he was getting rotational reps against UTSA in the blowout, he had a pick 6, and it was really where you could see that athleticism shine. You talk about a guy who played lacrosse and soccer. You can tell he's a long strider, and he runs like nobody's business. If he doesn't declare this year and he's not guaranteed a starting spot on the Texas Longhorns next year, if Bradyn Swinson's not out of there too, I can't remember Bradyn Swinson's eligibility off the top of my head. If he doesn't do himself a favor and transfer to a place where he can get starting reps, I think he's doing himself a disservice in terms of the money he'll make in the NFL, because I think these Texas guys always have a tendency to rise. We're seeing it with Alfred Collins currently, who's a guy I have never been super keen on, but it seems like every year we're getting a defensive lineman from Texas in the first round. And it's part of why Burke, who I view as sort of similar to you, a solid bottom of the 5th, top of the 6th round prospect, who, if he declares now, is risking going PFA just because he doesn't have a ton of starts and reps at the FBS level. He was starting last year. He got 5.5 sacks, but now that Sorrell's in play, and we had some of the guy who transferred in from UTSA last year was also getting some reps. It's just a crowded room. I think Burke stands out from that room in terms of straight up athleticism and length. But ultimately, I would really like to see him find a way to earn more time, whether it's, working his way up the Texas depth chart and rising into a starting spot on a championship caliber team, which, my uncle's not going to be happy. You think Texas is going to win on Saturday, but I think you're probably right. But whether it's working his way onto a championship caliber team or finding a spot where he can be the marquee edge rusher at a different powerhouse team, maybe one with maybe an Indiana type where their edge depth even this year was not super strong outside of Mangum Farrar. But I think Ethan Burke's a really strong player. I think right now he's sort of looked at that day 3 PFA range exclusively because he just hasn't gotten the starts and reps that I would hope for with a guy who's potentially coming out into the NFL. I think he should. My advice to him would be to stay in school and find a place where he can get full-time experience and show off his motor and his full-time pass rushing capabilities, show a little bit more of a move bag. But I think if he does declare, I think he's probably a day 3 sleeper. If you can get him as a PFA deal, you'll be getting a guy who can probably contribute eventually, just needs the time and practice and reps to really show off his skills.
You're right. If you're a niche, if your defensive line is a niche type of defensive line, you'd be good to take both of these guys because you're having some choose your own adventure on first down, second down,
Mhm.
and then you need the explosion kind of player on third down. So
Yeah, exactly. It's just the type of bag you wanna put your edge rushers in.
Yeah. So next one is Josiah Silver, and I want to give a shout out. So Josiah Silver, I know that you are following the Draft Professor page. So if you or any member of your family are listening right now, thank you very much. And Dean Bruce, you want to kick off what you saw with Josiah Silver from New Hampshire?
Yeah, I mean, Silver's been a fixture of that New Hampshire defensive line for a few seasons, and he's sort of the picture of the typical productive FCS lineman. I was really happy to see. I would consider him to be dominant at the FCS level, and it shows with his sack count. I mean, this year he racked up, I believe, how many sacks was it? 11.5 by the end of the season, and I was pleasantly surprised by his showing against the FBS team I watched him play against UCF. He was doing some pretty good work containing RJ Harvey, who is a running back who's going to get some NFL draft attention. I thought his run defense skills were pretty strong. I think he's a guy you can tell that could stand to do well, even playing a little bit of linebacker, just because he's a very strong tackler. He moves pretty well for 247. And I mean, a lot of it is in comparison to the FCS level talent he's playing against, but he is generally one of the faster guys on that field, and I'll be interested to see how he tests coming out, because that's going to sort of dictate. I think his pro day is sort of going to dictate where he ends up in the draft conversation, whether he's a top end PFA or someone who can sneak into the 7th round. I think he's gotten attention. He's been a consistent FCS All-American. I think I don't know if they've released the FCS All-Americans this year. It wouldn't shock me to see if he does another one, because he's racking up 11.5 sacks, 17.5 TFLs, doing great work in tackles. He's just a guy who's all over the field, and very consistent with tackling form, very good about using, I would say, limited length, but what length he does have, he uses well. And I think he, among his teammates, is one of the more polished guys. A lot of his fellow team members are doing a lot of push-pull against the offensive line, and I think Josiah Silver has a couple moves in his bag that I liked to see.
Cool. Dean Kindig, what do you think?
Yeah, 11.5 sacks and 17.5 tackles for loss this season. I think he's going to attract attention from coaches like McDermott, given the fact that he is an all-state wrestler. Quick first step, natural bend, power. He is one of the 4 finalists for the Buck Buchanan Award, which is basically the FCS equivalent. And he's CAA Football Defensive Player of the Year. And I watched their season-ending loss. It came down to New Hampshire and UT Martin, and you could see elusive, at least at that level of play, Colonial Athletic Association, and high motor, just got all the time. His pressures per game was among the highest in this draft class, regardless of conference. And and my other thing I wanted to say, well, very gregarious player. And if you thought R. Mason Thomas was short, Josiah Silver is shorter. 6'1" is generous.
Don't tell that to his Tinder profile.
Yeah. So that might be a thing to consider. Probably preferred free agent would be a good place for him.
And to me, this is also going to be a type of player that a coach will ooze over for special teams.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, and in Bills fans, I'm going to throw a name out from the past, but Mark Pike.
Yes.
Like one of the greatest 7th round draft picks ever. He was Bruce Smith's backup.
Yes.
But he played every special teams. Right. And I believe he's native to Northern Kentucky, not that far from where I live. So, okay. So the last edge we are going to talk about today Bradyn Swinson from LSU. So, Dean
Mhm.
Kindig, you want to kick this one off?
Yes, I love Bradyn Swinson. It's one of those. He's one of those players that's probably going to go to a team that goes very deep into the playoffs, because I have him right around that 31, 32, 33. He's a red shirt senior, a wonderful personality, and uh, the number of career solo tackles is high. One of the things that I liked about him was that he applied pressure on 17% of his pass rush attempts, as of the last time I looked. This is the guy. This is the anti-Jerry Hughes. He minds the back door every single play. No scrambles are coming in his direction. And if you're in, let's say, a situation where you're going to be playing Patrick Mahomes a lot, or a Lamar Jackson, you might want to take a player like this. Consistent ability to disrupt offenses, make the impact. As of Thanksgiving, I noticed he had 9 sacks and 32 hurries in 2024 alone. So he spent 3 seasons at Oregon, appeared in 30 games, and then of course came to LSU. So that he led all LSU defensive linemen in tackles for loss. And part of that's get off, part of it's strength. If you want to have get off strength and bend, you've got it all as far as the NFL is concerned.
So, Dean Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a guy who burst onto the scene this year. I mean, his early stretch, I believe he was in the top 3 for sacks for a very long time after his USC, or not his USC, his South Carolina and UCLA games. I must make the correction because he played USC earlier in the year. That was one of the LSU out-of-conference games. But his South Carolina and his UCLA games, he racked up 5 sacks in between those 2 games alone. And you can say he was picking on the weaker side of the SEC offensive lineman, but still generating 5 sacks against SEC caliber of offensive lineman is no slouch. And I'd make the point that he went up against Ole Miss 2 or 3 weeks later, and he put up 2 sacks against Micah Pettis, who I would make the argument is going to be a draftable offensive tackle talent in the future. And talk about a guy who brings strength to his game, working through 350 pounds of bulk pretty consistently in that Ole Miss game. Now he's only carrying about 250 pounds, but he puts it all in his arms, and he fires them out like it's a missile launcher. He is someone who threatens the inside of the chest of the offensive tackle super well. And I think he shows great functional strength and an incredible explosive first step. Like I said, a missile launcher of a player. But I do think that what I worry about is at times, I think this is where he benefits from taking advantage of those lesser SEC O linemen, because I think a lot of those guys have difficulty mirroring. And I think Swinson is a little bit below average in terms of mirroring and finding the best counter to an offensive lineman's moves. And I think a lot of the South Carolina offensive linemen never impressed me in that regard. And I think that's where Swinson sort of fell apart when he was going up against guys in Alabama, or even a Brandon Crenshaw Dixon he got stonewalled against. And Brandon Crenshaw Dixon's a guy who's pretty solid at mirroring. It's one of his stronger traits, I would say. But I thought Swinson, for the most part, I have Swinson in sort of that day 2 range. I believe he's going to the Shrine Bowl, and I think that's a great pull for them. Shrine Bowl's been doing really well for themselves this year. And I think a guy who combines strong functional strength along with explosive first steps is going to be a guy who makes his way into, at the very least, a rotational edge position, probably a starting position at some point in his career based on that athleticism. And I'm hoping for the best for him. I think it was a good decision to get out of Oregon and go to LSU, because he's clearly had a breakout there, and he's clearly doing it against high-level talent.
Right. My one worry about him is that he goes in the early second round, goes to a team that doesn't have the rotational lineman, and
has to start too early.
Compared to, let's say, going to the Bills when he has Rousseau and Von Miller and Rousseau, to learn from.
Yeah, I think
The counters is what he needs, and boom, a few draft picks more, and he's
Yep.
yeah.
So let's just go over a couple of the comments. So I think Josh is the highest at 23.
Mm-hmm.
Dean, you said you got him in the 30s.
I would. Oh yeah, wait.
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
Dean Kindig said he had him in the 30s. Dean Bruce, you said he's somewhere probably between 40 and
Probably like 65 to 70 range if I was putting a number on it.
Got it. And then Bill Sparks is like, yeah, he'll take him on day 3.
Not quite a solid range on him quite yet. I think that Shrine Bowl performance will do well for him.
But this is why, for everybody listening, this is why we do preseason scouting reports, and this is why everybody gives their assessment. We're not calling anybody right. We're not calling anybody wrong. This is just us saying, with the data and the way that we do an analysis, this is the way that we see them, right? And
yes,
everybody's going to have a slightly different maybe method of scouting and things of that nature. So stay tuned. What I got out of this is a player that we have to repeat several times and have different people give their evaluations just to kind of build a consensus of what is the player and then what's the risk and reward of where you choose to take them. So,
yeah.
Okay, so before we shift to offensive line, we're going to pause for a quick commercial break. So my name's Jim. You can find me on X at NFL Draft Fanatic. No I in Fanatic. And that is the Draft Professor Twitter account. Please subscribe to the Draft Professor on YouTube. Please like the YouTube video. We can tell that a lot of people are watching the podcast. From the standpoint of like Dean Kindig thought he had been in a room with Dean Bruce before, but it turns out he was just watching the podcast. So we have people that watch the podcast and come on. Now, granted, I've been doing draft stuff with Dean for the better part of 3 years, kind of thing. So if you're a Bills fan, you need to see Dean's board because he is tracking the Bills scouts. So his board is a thing of beauty. But Dean Kindig, do you want to tell everybody who you are and how they can find you?
Yeah, the easiest way I think is not my Twitter handle that's below my mug there, but it's probably go to buffalofambase.com. That's Del Reed's. Originally it was called Bills Mafia, is now called Buffalo Fam Base. The team has all rights to the words Bills Mafia. Just might want to say we had to change. I will run articles there about my board, and if you ever see a colorful spreadsheet on Twitter, it's probably mine. So I will be sharing them probably on podcasts as well here.
Yep. So, Dean, any of the players that we've covered today get your cyan color?
So I have no idea what cyan. Oh, I know what cyan is like. Is like
that's like blue.
It's like a teal.
Yeah. So I was going to say I don't want to say Miami Dolphins teal, right? So Tyler Batty is the one that I have in teal. Plus, obviously, some others that you've discussed in other podcasts, Kyle Kennard and so forth. And I always put in Bill's blue the wrestlers, and we have two, Josiah Silver on the defensive side of the ball, and we've got one on the offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about in a few minutes.
Cool. Dean Bruce, want to tell everybody how they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me at Dean is Tired on, I think at Dean is Tired _ on Twitter, at Dean is Tired, no _ on Instagram. You can also find me pretty consistently in the NFL Draft on Reddit Discord. I spend a lot of time there, and be on the lookout for me in the Lindy's draft guide this coming April. I'm going in on another year of putting out scouting reports for Lindy's. I can also be found on the YouTube channel 2 Minute Drill pretty consistently. I should be putting out a couple videos for them this year. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all over the place. I like to keep my options open when it comes to draft media. I just like to talk. If you'll find me pretty much anywhere. But if you ever want to talk to me personally, look up Dean is Tired on Instagram or Twitter or even Discord. You'll find me. Reach out. I love to talk ball.
Fantastic. Okay, let's flip to Mr. Earnest Greene from Georgia. Dean Kindig, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Now, Earnest Greene, I have at 111, and one of the reasons that I thought the year was going to go the way for Georgia, and that they would be the undefeated team, and not Oregon, but you have to remember that Earnest Greene played with Cedric Van Pran Granger. That was one of the guys that the Bills selected. He was a standout left tackle as a redshirt sophomore. Accolades all over the place, including first team freshman All-American by The Athletic. And he started all 14 games as a redshirt sophomore. So he's got the experience that people want, an out of the box OT that maybe could even move to guard inside if need be. One of the things is that offensive line gives you all the way across the board, first in the SEC, seventh nationally in sacks allowed, and that was true every year. Passing efficiency was incredible. Scoring offense, they're used to scoring 40 points, so he'd move right in. The best comment I heard about him was PFF College says he looks like human C4 when they get him out in space. And so if your team likes to pull guards, you might want to think about and does some spread concepts, like let's say the Lions. LT pro spread, you couldn't do much better. He's a redshirt sophomore, so I don't even guarantee that he's coming out, but he might want to stay in school and get his degree and end up being a first rounder next year.
So, Dean Bruce, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of time with Earnest Greene. I think currently he's struggling a little bit of where his fit is, because I mean he's sort of the perfect kind of offensive lineman, and like sort of the flip side of that coin, he's also like just a little he's 6'4" and a half. He weighs about 330 right now, 320. He's about 320 right now. So you could really reasonably put him anywhere you wanted. If you needed him to be a guard, like you said, Kindig, that he could play guard if he needed to. He could play tackle. I was really taken with his athleticism for the most part. I think that was what was really strong for me there. I thought he moved really well, and got to his spots really well. Was able to carry around the arc well. I thought that was something I really liked from him, was his lateral agility. He's able to, continue moving guys around the pocket, and usually he was pretty consistent about not collapsing inward. I was a little worried about his strength profile, just sort of in general. I think Georgia's the type of team where it's always nice to have a little bit more development with them, because they're some of the top strength and conditioning programs in the country. And I think the longer you stay there, the better you are. I was really excited about him coming into the year, as far as a guy who, he was carrying all freshman honors when he was coming out of his 2023 season. This year, I didn't think he took as many steps as he could have. I thought his run blocking was a little worse than usual. I didn't think he moved guys as well as I was used to watching his tape in 2023. But and And I also just think he's a guy who really needs to work on setting his anchor and getting balance, because I felt like I was seeing him on the ground more than I was seeing most of the other Georgia offensive linemen who had gone in the first round previously on the ground. Even guys like Broderick Jones, who are sort of struggling with that currently in the NFL. So I think if we're talking about guys who maybe could use some more time to build, I think Earnest Greene's one of them. I hope for the best, because I think that athletic profile is really strong, and I think he really has the chance to sort of determine his own destiny with how he wants to play at the NFL, whether he plays at tackle or guard. He's got the length for both. I just want to see him get better. I think he's very high potential, high volatility offensive lineman, but I think he could use another year with Kirby Smart protecting maybe someone who isn't Carson Beck, depending on where he decides to go. I think at times Beck was creating some problems for Greene in terms of stepping into Greene's passing lane. So,
Interesting.
Every time.
Yeah.
So, Dean Bruce, how high or low is he on your board? If you were,
I don't know. I saw day 3 in him. I was thinking probably 5th to 6th round, sort of in the range I had Jamari Sawyer coming out around the 5th round. And I mean, Jamari Sawyer turned into a solid starter for a year or two there. So this isn't to say that that's the end of the world for him. I think I would like to see a little more time in the Georgia system for him, and maybe, work with his skill set a little more, maybe figure out whether he's going to play tackle or guard for the future.
Good. So, Dean Bruce, you want to kick off Jonathan Mendoza from Louisville, and before you kick it off, he transferred to Louisville. It was really hard to find a picture of Jonathan Mendoza in a Louisville uniform in a game, but I bet Dean Bruce is going to tell us a little bit why. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, Mendoza had kind of a weird career at Louisville. I mean, last year. I mean, he was sort of a standout FCSO lineman at Yale, sort of worked alongside Kieran Emegadihe last year, and they were sort of a really strong duo. This year, he's going into a Louisville offensive line that doesn't have a similar caliber guy next to him, in my opinion. Mendoza's sort of the highlight of that offensive line, partially because of his just massive length and size and stature. And I think he doesn't bring with him some of the pad level problems as intensely as some of these 6'9" guys. I think about guys like Stone Forsythe and even to an extent Kingsley Swamatiah, who's not quite as tall, but still had some of those pad level issues. And I didn't think Mendoza carried them as much as some of these other 6'9" guys. And I liked his strength profile. I thought he was, he much held his own in the transition from FCS to ACC, especially in terms of like short-term lateral movement. I thought he moved pretty well. I think the real red flag is how much he was being rotated out of the game. This is part of why it's so hard, like Jim mentioned, to find a picture of him in a uniform. He's also rotating between both left and right tackle and being taken out of the game. It makes me question sort of some of his conditioning concerns. Like, he's a big guy. He's 6'9". Like, so if you're talking about a guy who's 6'9", it's just a known fact that guys who are that height sometimes have a little bit of these endurance problems. I mean, we saw it with Swamatiah last year. There were periods of time where he'd just go like 2 or 3 drives not in the game. And it was fine because BYU had offensive line depth for days. Louisville, this was not the case. Louisville lost pass rush reps when he was not in the game. And I also think Mendoza's movement is just sort of a general concern. I really worry about his straight line speed. There was a reason they weren't pulling him out, like doing anything outside of his short area stuff. Anytime he was asked to climb to the second level, it was like he was moving in mud. For that reason, I sort of view him as like a solid day 3 prospect. I think he should get drafted just based on size, length, and like strength prowess alone. But I think there are teams that are going to be turned off by him just because he doesn't move super well in a straight line, and you can't ask him to do a lot of second level work. And also just because he may not have the endurance. I think it's going to come down to a lot of conditioning with him. If he can get his conditioning right, I think there's high potential for a starting level offensive tackle, especially if with conditioning he can bring up some of those speed measures, work him down from maybe what's like looking to me like a 5.4, maybe down to a 5.3, high 5.2s range in terms of straight line speed. But if not, it wouldn't shock me if Mendoza sort of goes the way of some of the other FCS offensive linemen who are high potential but never really find their place against the high level of competition in the NFL. I hope for the best because I think he seems like obviously he's a very smart guy. He made it at Yale. And I think no matter what, he's going to find a good path for himself.
Dean Kindig.
Yeah, I have him as a preferred free agent. I tried to find about 50 players that I think that the Bills might be interested in for various and sundry reasons. And if anybody can do anything with a 6'8", 308 guy from Long Island, it would
Aaron
be
Cromer.
Aaron Cromer. So there is that, and the assistant offensive line coach for the Bills was a graduate assistant at Louisville. So he might like he has some discipline and some dedication to the sport. So that's good. The Bills tap the ACC often, but it's usually on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's equally good at pass and run. He's a redshirt senior. The Bills haven't paid as much attention to Louisville as in the past, and I have no explanation for that. The number 6 is the number of FBS starts that he has. That's bottom 5 for the entire class, and I'm tracking like 100 offensive linemen or
Okay.
offensive tackles. Sorry. So he's a nice guy, video game guy, Long Island guy, very affable. He did not start in the scouted game versus Clemson, and I never even thought about the conditioning aspect of it until Dean said something about that. So,
Okay, well, we will move on to Logan Jones from Iowa, and I believe this is a Feldman freak, I believe. So Dean Kindig, you want to kick off Logan Jones from Iowa?
sure. I have him. His best fit is a center left guard, flippable guy and multiple scheme. He's center at Iowa. I have him at 139 on my board. Bills haven't gone much to Iowa since Epinesa and Micah Hyde, who rejoined the Bills today. Rejoined the Bills today. The top 2 players at Iowa are safeties, so you'd think that they would be going there more often, or they think that they're going to be better than they ended up being. I don't see him as a particularly good pass blocker. I think that's a fault of his. He's fast, so he should be, but he's not a particularly good pass blocker. I actually like him better as a run blocker. And the other thing I would say is that you like longevity. He's got that, and he's got strength up the wazoo. So if you want to do something on the run blocker end of the thing, he has a 695-pound squat, which is the Iowa record, and his 409 shuttle would be the fastest at this combine. That's my guess.
Yep, that's the Feldman freak in him. But
yes, that's the freak.
So Dean Bruce, what do you want to tell us about Logan Jones?
Yeah, I definitely agree with my fellow Dean here. I think his best fit is center left guard as well. In a weak center class, I think it's definitely possible that athleticism comes across king here. Of the guys I've watched at center so far, Jones was definitely the fastest and one of the strongest. I view him as sort of an early day 3 guy for this reason, especially in a weak center class.
Yep.
I think he's gonna come away with a pick just based on that freak athleticism, whether you like it or not. I agree that some of his pass blocking could use some work. At times, I found him lackluster in getting his hands out in time. And part of that is because he has to fire the ball out from under his legs. But I think he's a little sloppy in terms of hand placement and technique there. And I think that's contributing to limited pass blocking as well. Also, it's just a little. I have been burned before by centers who are sub 300. I would like to see him add about 10 pounds of weight just so he can give me a little insurance on saying his name out loud. I remember the days of Donovan West. I am not going to go to bat for a sub 300 center if I do not have to.
Yes.
He better be running sub 5 if he's going to be under 290, because that's just sort of the thing I've noticed, is that teams really set their weight benchmarks for centers at 300, and he's got time to bulk up. I mean, he's Iowa. He's got the squat record. I mean, there's time for him to add a little more weight to his frame. I don't think he's maxed out quite yet. But I think he's a very solid center guard prospect. I think in terms of run blocking, he brings a lot there. I don't trust him as much in pass protection. I'm sort of with Kindig on that one. And you could sort of tell because Iowa just sort of consistently has a tough year with pass blocking and as a passing offense. But Caleb Johnson ran for 1,500 yards with that offensive line squad, and part of it was because Jones was opening up holes in the middle using that incredible strength profile. I'm very happy with him as a player. I think that if you're running sort of a zone run scheme or a spread offense where a guy needs to get to his points and move defensive linemen outwards so you can open your running back up to bigger holes, I think Logan Jones would make a really big impact for a team there. I'm excited about his future. I haven't seen him get invited to any All-Star games yet. I hope he picks up one because I think he definitely deserves a chance to show out against some top-end defensive line talent.
Yeah. 11 of the 25 centers that I'm tracking are under 300 pounds, and that's probably unacceptable for the NFL. And that would include the Ohio State center. So
McLaughlin.
Yeah. So I guess both Hinsman and McLaughlin.
And Brailsford. That guy's like 280.
Brailsford's even smaller than Jones. It might be by like 5 pounds.
Yeah. We got Brailsford at 275 right now. That's the bottom of the barrel.
Yep.
What a world. They just keep getting wider.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a bad year to need a center.
It's unfortunate.
So, Dean Kindig, you want to tell us about Blake Miller from Clemson?
Yeah. Okay, so the Bills have gone to Clemson the most of every school through now. And he plays right tackle. It's in an air raid scheme, and that translates less quickly to Joe Brady's offensive scheme, for instance, and for most offensive schemes. But right tackle, when you're 6'5", 315, you're right in the archetype for a lot of players. Many teams have been patient with offensive linemen and groom them on the practice squad. And I think that would be the case here. You'd like to salt him away and not start him right away. So I hope he goes to a team that already has their right tackle in place. He's got the length, he's got the strength. He's already a dominant run blocker, and I think he's improving in the pass blocking attempt. Back in August, I said, watch Phil Maffa run for 1,000 yards this year. If you check right now, he's at 1078. Blake demonstrates nice tools in pass protection, so I think he could get probably third round in there. Having this is crazy, 1,949 offensive snaps, all at right tackle, and that was before this year. So, and he's only one of two Clemson OTs back to 1986 to record multiple seasons with 950 plus snaps. So maybe he's tired also, Dean.
Wouldn't blame him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He has the most visits. He has the most visits of all of the tackles that I've tracked.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame him for being tired. It must be tiring to be a Clemson offensive lineman. I know a fellow scout who's playing reserve offensive line for him. Shout out Mason Johnstone at TDN. And Johnstone has been open about his Blake Miller love, and I admit it's gotten to me too as well. I think Blake Miller's athletic tools are really impressive. I think he is very light on his feet. He carries himself well, and I think he does a really strong job of turning those feet and keeping, but still maintaining an anchor for the most part, which helps because he's a little shaky in body control. I think especially in that upper body, there's times where he's shooting out into the shoulders and getting a little out over his skis, if that makes sense, sort of lurching at the at the top of his body.
Snatch trip.
Say again.
He'll be a victim. He'll be if he gets out too far over his skis, he'll be a victim to some of those edge rushers that we know are coming down the pike.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of guys, especially some of these undersized guys who are willing to take advantage of lurching offensive linemen. And that's what worries me with Blake Miller is I just think he needs to do a little bit more work setting up his body. I think that he, for the most part, when he gets his hands in the chest, he's pretty strong, and his grip strength is really strong as well. And I think he's very technically polished. I think he mirrors super well. And when it comes to blocking for Phil Maffa, I felt like most of Phil Maffa's more efficient runs were when he was plunging towards that right side, finding the hole that Blake Miller was creating. I felt like Maffa definitely struggled a little bit on the interior, like going towards the interior, and you could sort of tell that when he was rushing towards Blake Miller, it was more likely to be productive. I do kind of agree with Sparks that I think Clemson, the Bills are probably also there to watch DeMonte Capehart play with their defensive line depth right now. I don't know how much they're looking at. They're going to be looking for a right tackle next year. I've liked their tackle situation so far.
They're loving the situation they're in, but they're doing a lot more 6 offensive line stuff like they just did. So they'd love to have somebody. Anderson is interesting. They've got Anderson and Vandemark kind of waiting in the wings. So one of them can be the 6th offensive guy, but there'll always be somebody on the practice squad or 2, from the offensive line that are under Aaron Cromer for a couple of years, and they don't see the field, and then boom, they're ready to roll. It'll be really interesting to see where Blake Miller goes. It could be earlier than 3rd round.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I think especially in a weak offensive tackle class, I've got him graded in the top 50. So
yes,
I think it's possible.
Really, Dean Bruce? You have him top 50 grade?
I think so. I think he just is fast and strong enough and carries enough technical prowess. If he can just, fix his leverage a little bit, that's pretty much all I'm worried about. And I know leverage is one of the harder things to fix among offensive tackles, but I think he shows enough promise in run blocking, and working in an air raid scheme at Clemson has allowed him to get some polish in his pass blocking reps as well. It's just, making sure his body is all set up in the right place. And I'm going to be honest, as I've got a dad who went to Clemson who watches Clemson games religiously, so he's been on my television a lot. That offensive line coach needs to be executed at midfield personally. So I think Blake Miller is a victim of his coaching rather than and I think that if you get him into an NFL system, the leverage might follow, and I think he could definitely be a top 50 guy, especially in this kind of weak offensive line draft class.
So, Dean Bruce, you are a Jaguars fan, correct?
Yeah, of course.
So Jacksonville takes him in round 2. You okay with that?
We just re-signed Walker Little, so I'd be a little surprised if we take him in round 2. But if we took him, I'd be happy. Yeah, I mean, what, 35?
Do the Jaguars have tackles? I guess, yeah, because the Jaguars used a first-round pick when they traded with Buffalo on a tackle.
We took Anton Harrison. So
yeah,
tackle spots locked up. If Blake Miller wants to play some guard for us, I'd be happy to have him. We do not have a guard spot locked up just yet.
Let me change the team. New England top of round 2.
There we go.
Pick
That's where
Blake
it's at.
Miller.
That would be perfect for him. Get May some more protection. That'd be nice.
Okay. So, Dean Bruce, you said that he's in your top 50. What
100%.
tackle is immediately ahead of him on your board? And then which tackle is immediately under him in your board, if you don't mind?
Let's see. I would say immediately ahead of him is, let me think about this, because I'd put him behind, let's see, Campbell, Banks for sure. Is he? Oh, he's probably just behind a guy we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about very soon. I would say he is offensive tackle. Let's go 6 on my board.
So
he's
Conerly, Simmons, Ursery.
Conerly, Simmons, Ursery, Banks, Campbell, as far as guys who I think are coming out.
And then who's the tackle you have immediately behind him?
I would have Cameron Williams just behind him.
Got it. Okay. And that actually makes a lot of sense now to me, because Blake Miller, I think the floor is higher for Blake Miller than it is for Cam Williams.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Cam Williams comes with a lot of raw athleticism as well, but and a great build. But I think Blake Miller has that and a bit of a better floor.
Okay, so the big finish, Josh Conerly from Oregon. Dean Bruce, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, talk about supercharged athleticism. I have loved Conerly for a very long time. He was a guy I had my eye on entering the year when we were because a lot of people had their eye on a Johnny Cornelius coming into the year because he was a big time transfer out of Rhode Island, I believe, into that Oregon offensive line. So a lot of guys were having eyes on him. Inspired me to watch the Oregon offensive line. Conerly immediately jumped out to me as having supercharged athleticism. Just moves so well. He's just incredible. His footwork, his ways to get into the line are incredible. I think, and I think he has the potential to be a top 3 tackle. He's not quite in my top 3. He's just outside. I think he's probably 4, but 4 or 5 depending on how I'm feeling at the moment. But Conerly moves really well, brings a really great strength profile to the offensive line. He just has nutso movement in space, and I think he also continues this in his pulling game. He has mauler tendencies in run blocking. He fires his hands out, shoots straight into the chest. I think he maybe has a little bit more work to do in terms of technical refinement, but he's such a super athlete that I think it's going to be fine for him. And I think also he carries his body really well. I didn't worry about his balance, which is shocking for a guy who moves as well as he does. I feel like some of the more athletic tackles sometimes have trouble where they're moving so fast that they can get knocked on their feet really easily. I didn't see that with Conerly, which makes me think his upside is really strong. I also just like the fact that he's 6'4", has good length, could play guard and center if you really wanted him to. He's sort of able to flex along all 5 positions. I hope he stays at tackle where he's going to earn the most value for his money because I think he's a very good player. But he could really play anywhere if you wanted him to. If a team decides they want to play him at guard, I say give it a shot because I think he's got the build for it as well. I think you could do a lot with him, and I think his upside is pretty much uncapped. I think with that athleticism, you could be looking at the next great tackle for any team as far as future outlook goes.
Okay, so Dean Bruce, 2 questions for you. One question is going to be right tackle, left tackle, and the second question would be, do you think his arm length is going to measure out to be a tackle?
Okay, I'll answer left tackle, right tackle first. I would put him. I mean, he's currently playing left tackle, so I don't see why you should shift him off of that if you don't need to. I think like if you've already got an established left tackle, maybe moving him to right tackle might be good, but I think you should I think generally with rookies, I like to see them work at the position they worked at in college first. So I would say put him at left tackle immediately. See if he needs to move to right, if he can move to right tackle later down the line if you really want to. And as far as arm length goes, I think estimates for him came in at high 33s, if I remember correctly, when I was looking at him earlier. So I think he probably just squeezes over the line for offensive tackle for me. If he comes in at around 33s, it wouldn't shock me if he gets bumped to that guard conversation, maybe starts playing some guard at an ASG or gets some reps at guard at his pro day. We'll just sort of see how that shakes out. I think that's a narrative I'm going to be tracking as we go further down into the.
What is the arm length threshold for a tackle? Is it 34 or 33?
For me, it's 33 and a half. I know some sticklers who cap it at 34, and I know some teams who are willing to play guys down as low as 32, like guys who like with Zach Tom and Raymond. I think those two teams care a little less about length. I cap it at 33 and a half usually personally, but it's times have changed in the NFL. Length isn't as important as it used to be, I don't think, even though it's important to me.
Dean Kindig, what do you have on Josh Conerly?
Yeah, so I think the Bills are always shopping for their next left tackle. Deion Dawkins is great, and they'll let him stay as long as he wants to stay. Everybody loves a snowman, but I would say that Conerly is probably on their short list for that. If he lasts till their numbers 39, he's not going to be picked at 32. Wink, wink. And he's not going to last until 60. So he's somewhere in there. And remember, he's a junior. Great pass blocker, okay run blocker, and couple of things about him. He's from Seattle, so of course his family wants to see him go out there. He led the team the last 2 years in number of snaps, so he's another tired one, right? He needs to improve his play strength and eliminate some mistakes. I think his hand usage is awesome. Cromer would love that. Oregon as a whole was eighth in yards before contact per rush last year, and they've improved this year. And remember, Johnny Cornelius is on the other side, but Conerly is part of this. He's no slouch in the pass game. Allowed 1 sack and 17 pressures in 511 pass blocking opportunities, and this year, Oregon led the nation in passing offense, 346.9 yards per game. Part of it's their scheme, but double scouts are going to some of the games, like Illinois, Oregon. So that's always fun. And 2 scouts went to the Michigan game as well. You could see him being picked as early as number 32 if a team wanted to stock up that already had somebody in place. I like that idea a lot. He's one of the faster left tackles as well. He's played his spread option type scheme that wouldn't be alien, and he doesn't know losing.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, and I remember Joe Marino was pointing something out many, many weeks ago, but one of the things he pointed out is that teams are going to trade up into the back end of the first round to get an offensive tackle. So like last year, nobody was trading up to get him because there were so many. But if you look like the last 8 picks of round 1, that was where Graham Barton went.
Yep.
And then there was a lineman that was taken right before him. And like Bill Sparks and I were talking about that player yesterday, and I've already forgotten who it was. But there's always offensive linemen taken at the back of the first round because if you need one, like because Conerly's going to come in, he will be able to start as a rookie. He's may need a little bit of work, but he's going to be able to start. So if you need an offensive tackle, you may trade your 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick to go up to the back end of round 1. And, a team like Kansas City, Buffalo, Detroit will just trade out 4 or 5 spots.
Yep.
So I would expect – I like the way – Dean Kindig, I like the way you put this, is that he'll probably be there at pick 30, but he's not going to last until pick 60.
Yeah.
That's his range. And maybe he goes a little bit earlier than 30, but you're looking – and there's a lot of tackles that are going to go in that same range. right? Because that's where Josh Simmons is probably going to go, and he
Yeah.
declared today. And then Cam
thought maybe he
Williams, I would expect to go in that same range. Dean Bruce, you're putting Blake Miller in that same range.
Yep.
So that's where tackles go. And like I think Buffalo even drafted Deion Dawkins in round 2.
Yeah.
Right? That may have been Doug Whaley's best draft pick. maybe that was Trey White, but
Depends on who you
there
ask.
can be a discussion there.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, we have finished our players. So for the approximately 100 people that are watching right now,
Cool.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
You are appreciated. Please subscribe on YouTube. Please like the podcast on YouTube. Please follow at NFL Draft Fanatic on X or Twitter. No I in Fanatic. We have content on this channel every day. So tomorrow we are coming at you with some interior defensive linemen, more offensive linemen. So we got 2 straight days of hog mollies. Every Wednesday, every Thursday. We got, I think tomorrow it's going to be Newt, Josh, and Owen. And then we'll finish it out with the weekend with some corners and wide receivers with Bill and Randall. And I believe David and Devin are doing a whole nother Edge episode as well this week. So the last 3 days of the week, or the last 2 days of the week, you're getting 3 podcasts. So thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by Draft Professor. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please like the podcast on YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. Thank you again for watching. On behalf of everybody that put this podcast together, we appreciate our followers very, very much. And we look forward to seeing you on a future podcast.